good evening, and welcome everyone to BYOSpirit and Everything Paranormal. My name is Paula. I'm one of the paranormal investigators in the group. I should be joined here shortly by Alex, who is my partner in crime in all things paranormal here in Northern Virginia. He's the head of a group that we run called Dark Hollow Ghost Stalkers. That's our paranormal investigation group here in Virginia. Marta is not able to make it tonight. She had something come up. So just last minute, literally 5 minutes before I sat down, I found out she wasn't going to be here tonight. So tonight's discussion is actually a new series that I want to start. And it's on the Unborn, and we are discussing elementals tonight. And a lot of times, folks, when you think about like a haunting or paranormal activities or anything like that, you automatically think that it's either, you know, like spirit or a ghost, or it's, you know, like a demon, something like that. Those are the two main categories that a lot of people really resonate with. And we kind of lump things into two different categories. And I kind of lump it into, you know, entities that have had a human soul. In other words, they have been human, they have been born, they have, the soul has entered that child's body, and then they have passed away from a human form and then transcended into spirit from there. You know, they've gone back into the pool of souls, so to speak. There's also another group that we lump in together, and it's a really big kind of group when you stop and think about it, and that's the unborn. These are entities that have never had a human soul that can contribute to or be responsible for haunting-like activities, or activities that can literally just scare you to death almost. And most people, you know, automatically, well, okay, that's demons, right? Well, it's not just demons. It can be demons, it can be angels, it can be the fae, it can be elementals, it can be things that people have created through their own trauma, like a PK entity, a PK energy, which is psychokinetic energy that just grows because they've never dealt with a very deep-seated grief from a traumatic experience. And this, you know, that PK energy just follows that person around because it's actually attached to that person. It's not ever been had a soul, so, but yet it still is responsible for a type of haunting activity. So, you know, a lot of folks, especially, you know, like Judeo-Christians aren't really, and Jews, Muslims, you know, aren't really that familiar with what we call elemental spirits. And I should check my pronunciation. It's elemental, not elemental. I need to work on that. Now, witches, Wiccans, Native Americans, pagans are very, very familiar with and routinely work with the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And there's actually a fifth element that is often referred to as the ether or akasha, but that spirit doesn't actually have an entity attached to it, where earth, air, fire, and water actually have like physical representations and manifestations associated with those elements. Elementals are just that. They are assimilated to one of the four main elements. An elemental universally is accepted as being a magical entity who embodies or personifies a force of nature and therefore possesses the power of elemental cognizance, elemental detection, elemental generation, elemental manipulation, elemental self-transmutation, elemental expungement, and elemental immunity. And these powers are usually exclusive to that element's own unique set. Okay, so, you know, air elementals don't mess over in what earth elementals do, and water doesn't mess with air. They're all disparate disciplines and different types of entities, different characteristics, and they don't mix and match with each other. Okay, and now earth elementals are called gnomes, and you guys are probably thinking, oh, you mean those little you know, garden things that are plastic and are not so much. They've, you know, fairy tales and everything have kind of you know, morphed things over the years, but that's not exactly it. But that's what people think when you say the word gnome. Air elementals are called sylphs. Fire elementals are called salamanders, and you know, they're basically just that, those little lizard things like a salamander. And then water elementals are called undines, Undines, undines. Another group of beliefs that are very familiar with the earth, air, fire, water set of elements are Native Americans. Now, their culture recognizes those 4 elements and then further breaks it down into even more distinct, what are called spirits within those elements. Okay, so you could have something like a tree spirit or an animal spirit or a wind spirit. And then within those, each nation and then each tribe within that nation may have different spirits that they identify with. Okay, so it can be very, very complicated when you get into, you know, shamanic traditions within the Native American, you know, practices and everything like that. And then there are also practices, you know, of the Far East that have a different set. Their elements are different. They're not earth, air, fire, and water. You know, it's metal, wood, you know, blah, blah, blah kind of stuff. Okay, so, but I'm not going to be addressing the Far Eastern set of elements because I don't work with them that often, and I can't pretend to be an expert in that area. I'm going to go into more detail with each elemental group now. But you know me, when in these chats and these live streams, I always like to give you guys a little bit of history, give you like a real world case. I like to give you, you know, a historical case and, you know, something that you may have heard of, you know, watched on a TV show or something like that as, you know, an example of what I'm talking about. So and this is really kind of hard for a lot of people to really wrap their head around if they don't have either a Native American or a pagan, neo-pagan belief system. You know, it's really hard for Judeo-Christians to kind of wrap their heads around everything that I'm going to be talking about tonight. Now, the actual first writings of really classifying the elements into gnomes, you know, undines, sylphs, and salamanders is attributed to the 16th century alchemist. He was an alchemist and a physician, and his name was Paracelsus. And he described elementals as invisible spiritual counterparts of visible nature, many resembling human beings in shape and inhabiting worlds of their own, unknown to man because his undeveloped senses were incapable of functioning beyond the limitations of the grosser elements. So, like I said, pagan belief systems and witches are very familiar with the idea of elemental spirits and working with those energies because they work with them routinely in their magical rituals and in their spells. Each element in pagan traditions are affiliated with a cardinal point. In other words, the north is affiliated with earth, so that is the domain of gnomes. East is affiliated with the element of air, and that is the domain of sylphs. The south is the element of fire, and that is the domain of salamanders. And then, let's see, the west is the element of water, and that includes undines, okay? So the way that witches and Wiccans and pagans routinely work with these, and I'm sure, you guys have probably seen, like on Charmed or some of the shows on TV about witchcraft and stuff, where you quote unquote call the quarters. In other words, you'll hear them say something like, depending on the tradition, I call to the guardians of the watchtowers of the north to elemental earth and the gnomes. Okay, so that would be something that you would hear in a typical, pagan ritual, for them to call those elements into their ritual, one, for protection, and two, each element has specific what are called correspondences or traits that are associated with the element. So the first one that we're going to kind of tackle are those cute little things called gnomes. And Paracelsus described gnomes as earth-dwelling spirits, and they are present in a lot of ancient and medieval mythologies, and they are often guarding mines and underground treasures. So, and this is particularly notable, like in the Germanic peoples of like the dwarfs. So Paracelsus in his writings described them as 2 spans high. So in other words, very kind of short and stocky, very reluctant to interact with humans, and able to move through solid earth as easily as humans walk through the air. Just as we're walking on top of the earth, they can go through rock and, dirt just as quickly. They have the power over earth, flowers, trees, and minerals. They give us basic energy of life in its rawest form. So in magical practice, earth is associated with attracting money, fertility, strength, success, and getting your material needs met. In other words, a roof over your head, food in your belly, the whole 9 yards, okay? So that's kind of what the domain of earth elements are, in addition to, like trees and the vegetation. You think about everything that encompasses, that's what earth elements are responsible for. So then we move on to sylphs, which are associated with the element of air, and they reside in the east. And Paracelsus described them as being rougher, coarser, taller, and stronger than humans. They have the power over clouds, snow, gases, and winds. They prefer the mountaintops and high winds. Hold on just a second. Alex is having to bail out. He can't connect. And they are also, many believe that sylphs are the origin of the story of, like gossamer winged fairies and things like that. But when actuality, fairies are very different than sylphs, than air elementals. So the element of air is associated with the muses, genius, and inspiration. So anything that is like, learning, knowledge, poetry, writing, anything that requires creative thought, that is the domain of an air elemental. They, and they like the high cliffs. The next group are salamanders, and they are associated with the element of fire, and their domain is the south. And the elemental salamander is depicted as a typical salamander. I mean, it's like a lizard-like form, and it has an affinity with elemental fire. So according to Paracelsus in his writings, they appear as little balls of light, fireballs, or tongues of fire. And in, legend has it that a particular type of salamander is actually appears as St. Elmo's fire on the rigging of ships. So I'm sure you guys, probably know the legend of St. Elmo's fire. So they also have the power over flame and smoke. And fire helps us develop our will. That's our willpower, courage, your authoritative bearing. It's passion, not only like passion for what you're doing, but physical passion and sexual prowess, your sexual drive, and just raw power. They can also, on a little bit of a negative side, be the source of impulsive behaviors. And then the last group are undines, and they are associated with water and in the West. So they have the power over streams, rivers, marshes, ponds, waterfalls, oceans, and even fountains. So they're also associated with rain, mist, fog, dew, on the leaves, things like that. They often appear as just a pure blur of color. But a lot of people, they have been associated as like mermaids, so you guys have heard about mythical mermaids and sirens and everything like that. They can appear as humans, but they can also appear as small creatures. And what undines do is they feed our various emotions and spiritual impulses. They create that attraction between people, like a love attraction. They also nourish our psychic faculties. They help us heal, and they help us heal especially with emotional trauma. So if you think about it, water is usually about emotions, dreams, and things of that nature, intuition, mystical things. So all of those are the realm of undines. Now, when it comes down to Native American spirits, Native American spirits are also associated with the 4 base elements of earth, air, fire, and water. But their belief systems further break them down into what are called spirits. Instead of elements, they're called spirits. So like under earth, you could have like plant, herbs, rocks, mountain spirits. Underwater, you could have sea, lakes, and river spirits. You could have season spirits, weather spirits, so like lightning spirits, rain spirits, thunder spirits, animals and insects. We can throw a big group is sun, star, sky, moon, eclipse, and northern lights. Those are all spirits, and they're all separate little categories, but it's kind of like celestial beings, kind of. Time, day or night, it can be water, it can be wind, it can be spirit guides, it can be poison, and it can also be death. Now, Native American nations, you've got big, for instance, you've got the Lakota Nation. But in the Lakota Nation, you have many tribes that are part of the Lakota Nation, okay? So the nations of Native Americans are then brought down into the various tribes underneath. And each tribe, because they subsisted separately, have their own set of spirits that they work with, and that they, when they go like to, Cherokees go to their NEPT for a vision quest or for any kind of spiritual work or shamanic work, theirs is different than, say, like a Midwestern Apache set of spirits would be. Okay, so it's very, very difficult, and it's impossible. I mean, you could research Native American shamanism for probably years and still not capture all of the nations, all of the tribes, all of the spirits associated with each one of the tribes, and get it right. I can, if you guys are interested, I can post in a document in the group a couple of books on Native American belief systems and shamanic practices if you want. I will be posting my notes in the group either later tonight or tomorrow morning. So, you can have these as a reference tomorrow. Now, it is, like I said, when I first started the live stream, when people think of hauntings, they automatically think either spirit, a ghost, or a demon, right? So there's also, you can have an elemental haunting. I'm sorry, my pit bull is trying to play catch with me, and he's not wanting me to talk to you guys tonight. He's being difficult. So elementals prefer to exist in their natural environment. They do not particularly like to interact with humans. They do not like to really be out of their element. So a lot of elemental hauntings are usually due to one of two great big categories, okay? One is what is called malignant magic. So in other words, a witch, a Wiccan, Satanist, someone pagan, neo-pagan, someone who works with elements, conjured an element for a reason, and that did not release, when you call an element to you, you release at the end, you release that element back to its realm, to its natural state. You don't want the element hanging out with you all the time, right? Their natural state is to be in their natural surroundings, okay? So now, they can also become active because of disturbances to their natural habitat or surroundings. So, for instance, was there development that tore up a lot of earth that could disturb earth elementals? Was a new mine. I'm from West Virginia. Did a new mine, you know, start up, or did something happen where mining activities caused an upset? You know, something like that. When my hometown is, excuse me, at the juncture, we got the Greenbrier River on one side and the New River on it in the other in West Virginia. And on the New River, they built a huge dam called the Bluestone Dam, and it created a big man-made lake. It rerouted part of the New River. It caused my familial kind of where the family community was they had to leave the community, and then the Army Corps of Engineers built the dam, and everybody had to move out because of the likelihood of their homes being flooded by rerouting the New River. So something like that could cause like a water elemental, because you've rerouted something to act up. So earth elementals, some of the signs that an earth elemental is kind of, you know, displeased, where you can find them. Earth elementals, you may have somebody see really stocky figures that are like 2 to 3 feet tall, that are kind of like male in form, but they may not be fully realized. You may catch EVPs with extremely gruff voices, you know, very deep voices. They do not like man-made metals. So metal objects may just start disappearing anywhere around, you know, especially like shovels and stuff like that, tools that are, you know, have a metal head on them. They can be very easily attached to mines and caves. They can also be attached to crystals and rocks. So if you get, like you spend a whole bunch of money on a great big beautiful geode that is like your prized possession, and all of a sudden you have weird stuff happening in your house, it could be because you have an elemental attached to that crystal or that geode, because that was its prized possession, and it's mad that you took it out of its element, or a miner took it out of its element, and then you purchased it. So it's followed that prized possession of it. Now, elementals, earth elementals can cause animals to behave strangely. They can cause a person to suddenly be overcome with fear of being buried alive. And there is a very famous occultist named Dion Fortune, and I think their primary book was written right around, I want to say 1971. It was the early 70s. And they noted that they attributed the phobia, agoraphobia, in other words, the fear of leaving your house, to earth elementals. In other words, you treat your home kind of like your cave, and you want to be a hermit and you don't want to leave it. That could, if you're normally a very extroverted, type person, and then all of a sudden you don't want to leave the house, you might have an elemental imbalance going on. Water elementals. Humans, when you think of mermaids, there are all those tales of, the shipwrecks with sirens and, mermaids, these beautiful, women, beings and stuff like that. Humans who interact with water elementals can often become very obsessed with water, okay? They can sometimes cause humans to commit suicide by drowning. Unexplained and repeated plumbing problems can be associated with water elementals. Unexplained pools of water that appear are also very common when elemental water is out of balance. And just as an aside, water is an excellent conductor of electromagnetic fields. I've talked before about Alex's daughter's house down in Summer Duck, and we were down there one evening, and I mean, it was just a rip snorting thunderstorm, lightning cracking all over the place, and that house was so much more active with that kind of raw kind of fire energy and water energy being there with the lightning and all that downpour deluge of rain. It was just like, to the power of 10 for the paranormal activity that we caught that night. Now, fire elementals can be explained like unexplained eruptions of fires. And this was reported by occultist Dion Fortune in their book in 1971. A human that suddenly develops an obsession with fire, becomes a pyromaniac, that kind of thing. And then if you all of a sudden see like fireballs, self-reflecting orbs of light, and tongues of flame have also been reported. And then items that just kind of like catch on fire for no daggone reason, just sort of almost spontaneously combust with no underlying reason why this would happen. Like, say, bad practice to have rags that are soaked with mineral spirits or Varsol or anything like that, used to clean paint brushes and clean up paint, and then put it in a tight, bucket of some kind. The chances of those vapors kind of going off and spontaneously combusting are pretty doggone good. And then the last one is an air elemental. And those have been documented more in history. And air elementals often throw and break objects. Dion Fortune attributed air to be responsible like for sexual assaults because of that physical attraction kind of thing with air. He also can cause more agitation and fighting among humans in the locale where things are, out of control, where the air elemental is unhappy. So there's also like often where air elementals reside, there can also be a corresponding kind of, I was going to say, well, how can I put it kind of delicately? People tend to throw themselves to their death by jumping out of high places when air elementals are out of balance. But air elementals are also responsible and associated with joyful music, with bells, with, you know, a good party, and just happy sounds of parties. And animals associated with air elementals include black dogs, horses, badgers, hares, and pigs. There also, if you guys have heard of cairns and hinges, which are stone circles. So everybody's probably heard of Stonehenge. That's a hinge, and these are very, you know, common in you know, in the UK, in Ireland, England. They're really less popular in other parts of you know, like Europe and stuff, but there are some like in Scandinavian areas and things. So, you know, if you see like stone circles and then, you know, upright kind of stones, that can be a sign of where an air elemental resides. Now, there's also a lot of hinges in South America. And a lot of these more recent studies have kind of, it's kind of funny, they have found that there is a naturally higher level of EMF present in these areas where cairns and hinges were constructed by, you know, all those years ago. So for, you know, a non-technological society to be able to detect quote unquote EMF, or what they would have called like a ley line, an Earth's, you know, energy line, and then use that, you know, and done the precise alignment for, you know, equinoxes and everything like that. It's pretty amazing when you stop and think about the, you know, just the sheer math involved in setting something like that up. I mean, it's really tremendous. Now, there are some pretty famous elemental hauntings throughout the world, but probably the most famous one is the Leap Castle in Leap, County Offaly, Ireland. And this one has been, you know, investigated by, you know, ghost hunters, by TAPS, by Ghost Adventures, you know, Zach Bagans and his crew. There have been so many paranormal investigation shows. They have, you know, spiritual hauntings, but they also have an elemental haunt. So that elemental manifests as a short skeletal monster with sharp claws, decayed face, and smells like sulfur. The modern day sightings of this entity say that it resembles Gollum from Lord of the Rings. One very early belief in the castle's history was that the elementals was put there by druids long before the castle was built to protect the sacred site used for initiations and druid magic. And then another theory is that the elemental was placed there by an invading force to burn the castle from the inside. And the person responsible is thought to be Gerald Fitzgerald, who was the Earl of Kildare at the time. And Gerald Fitzgerald was a pretty renowned magical practitioner, and he had attempted to take over that castle on several occasions. So that would be kind of like, you know, that malignant magic that I mentioned a little bit earlier. That is an example of very malignant magic, where it not only was the intent to leave an elemental there to do your dirty work ad nauseum, You know, and it wasn't just a practitioner that forgot to, you know, dismiss that elemental back to their realm, but that was a practitioner, you know, who consciously used an elemental force for bad. Okay. Now, most paranormal investigators have no earthly idea how to deal with an elemental haunting. A lot of them do not even know how to recognize an elemental haunting, and a lot of times they attribute it to like demonic activity and stuff like that, when really it's not demonic in nature. It's an element that's pissed off, or a Native American spirit that's pissed off. So you cannot completely banish an elemental, but you can release it to its own realm. And that's the same with Native American spirits. You can't banish them, but you can make peace with them and coexist with them, okay, quite happily. So to recognize these types of haunts, it requires a tremendous amount of research from paranormal investigators. And I know you guys have heard me, you know, call myself the queen of 1,000 different questions. And I know that you know, probably get tired of me asking stupid questions all the time, but there's a method to my madness in asking the questions. And that's because if you suspect something like this may be going on, you need to do a couple of things, okay? You can take a look at Google Earth. Now, this can give you a pretty good indication. You pull up the property in question and zoom out. And once you zoom out, you look for things that could have rerouted an element or disturbed, like rerouting a water source, or disturbed a tremendous amount of earth. Is there a new, for instance, development being developed? You know, was there a new mine a mile down the road that got opened? That kind of stuff that might have disturbed that element in its natural state. Now, when you zoom out, you can then see, was there a natural hinge or a natural stone circle that's there? And a lot of times you might be able to determine if, you know, there were like burial mounts or something like that in the area. You have to do a thorough research on the property that you're getting ready to investigate. It helps tremendously if you know a psychic medium or have psychic mediums in your group that are adept at doing what is called remote viewing. In other words, you have the homeowner send you pictures inside and outside of the property. And then by sending those pictures to somebody like Marta, somebody like me, somebody like Alex, we can remote view this property. And from those pictures, pick up if we think there is any kind of imbalance, or pick up like an inkling of what might be going on before we ever step 1 foot on that property. So it really helps to, you know, involve someone like a Marta, who is a psychic medium, in doing research on places that you suspect might have a little bit of an elemental imbalance. Now, if your research uncovers that there was Native American presence in the area, especially if the Native Americans were displaced, especially if Native Americans, if there was a war between tribes right there in that area, you know, two tribes that didn't get along. Or if there were, especially, you know, battles with the U.S. government, any of that kind of stuff, you have really got to do your research on that area. And this includes, you know, you may have to make a trip down to the, you know, town's historical society, or contact somebody in the historical society, contact somebody in the genealogical society, contact, you know, depending on how big the town is, the town's librarian, and ask them for help. You know, make an appointment to come down, look at archives that may not be online. Not, you know, every county in rural, you know, areas have don't have all their archival stuff, you know, digitally done now. It also helps if you know someone that is either a medicine man or a shaman who can give you some guidance about the tribe and how to contact somebody that you can reach out to if you need like shamanic intervention or intervention with a medicine man or medicine woman, okay? Because those are very powerful people within the Native American culture that can help rebalance everything in the area if you need to. Sometimes it's also beneficial if you know a Reiki master. Reiki masters are adepts at recognizing energies and balancing them, getting rid of negative energies, and bringing things back into the alignment that they're supposed to be. So luckily within our little, you know, circle, we have access to all of those. Like I said, you know, Marta's a wonderful psychic. Alex is a wonderful psychic. You know, I do fair, you know, on most occasions. I'm a Reiki master. I'm also a witch. You know, Alex is an ordained minister. You know, I have a very good friend who's the grandson of Cherokee, very famous Cherokee medicine man named Ayuni. So he made me a, you know, handmade paho, which is a prayer stick. And he made me a handmade dream catcher from his tribe. So it helps to have, if you have a paranormal group that has those contacts. So if your elemental, if you think it is result of malignant magic, then you're going to have to more than likely reach out to a magical practitioner. In other words, witch, Wiccan, pagan, druid, you know, something like that, to help you call that element back and then release it back to its natural state. Release it back to the realm that it came from, okay? Because most people don't have the ability to work with an element that way. So, Native American spirits, like I said, it usually requires the knowledge of the tribe, and you preferably, if you can have a member of the tribe that is specific to that area, you may have to reach out to them. You may have to enlist the help of a tribal shaman, medicine man, or medicine woman. Usually Native American spirits can be placated with an offering of some kind. And that offering, you know, you have to tend to it, you know, and kind of feed it with the thanks and the energy and the due reverence that you're supposed to give it, and pay homage to that spirit, you know, and for you to develop that relationship with that elemental spirit so that you can live in peace with it, okay? Because you're not going to get rid of them. You can just placate them, make peace with them, but you're not ever going to be able to banish them. You can forget about it. So, Alex and I actually have a case that we worked. down in Powhatan, Virginia. The homeowner had several complaints of various types of paranormal activity inside and outside the house. The outside activity included seeing a black dog-like creature with red, eyes. And prior to arrival for the initial investigation, the homeowner had asked us, whatever we got to do, get rid of whatever's in the house, do whatever we can to, get things to where everything's cool and not so upheaved, because she and her daughter were like literally scared to death. So we did an investigation on the actual area around. That area, that remote viewing involved 2 psychic mediums, me and Alex, and it also involved that member of the Cherokee Indian tribe who's a medicine man and shaman, doing a remote viewing for me. And when you looked at Google Earth and you zoomed out, there were a couple of things that became very apparent. Well, actually 3 big things. Number 1 is that there was a huge power station, not even a half a mile down the road, big towers, and those things put off mad levels of EMF. So there's a feed for any kind of like spirit activity that's going on in the area right there. That's a feed. When you zoomed out in Google Earth, a little bit down the road, you saw a pentagram that was cut into a field. I think it was across the street and down from the property in question. And you could also tell that houses had been built after this property in question was built. So the property in question was built, I believe, in the early 70s. The other properties had only been built like within the last year to 2 years, if I remember correctly. So you have a lot of things there that can be feeding into an elemental imbalance. And through that remote viewing, I automatically picked up, Alex automatically picked up, and the shaman picked up that there was a Native American elemental spirit outside that was out of balance. Things were just not right. And the shaman suggested that we do an offering. And this offering consisted of an apple tree sapling. I believe we had blue cornmeal, because I remember making a special trip to Trader Joe's to pick it up, fruit, and tobacco. Okay. So the last thing after we did our investigation, one of our team members, the 2 tribes that were in that area were the Powhatan tribe and the Pamunkey, P-A-W-M-U-N-K-E-Y tribe. And it's here in Central Virginia in Powhatan County. So one of our team members that was there had, a lineage from the Pamunkey tribe. And then I have a lineage from the Shawnee tribe. So you had a couple of the team members that had like a Native American affiliation. So, that Native American spirit, could have, especially with the one from the Pamunkey tribe, really affiliated with him because his tribe was from this particular area. So what we ended up doing at the very end, and it was really kind of funny because Alex and I were sitting outside on the picnic table, I think, and we were just chatting, and all of a sudden I said, Alex, got your digital camera on you? He's like, well, yeah, I always do. I said, good. Take a shot right over my left shoulder. And he did. He pulled it out, click, 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 you know. And then when we looked at the pictures, there was this like big, humongous mist. I mean, it was just kind of like an ectoplasm kind of thing that was literally right over my left shoulder. And it didn't feel particularly ominous to me. It just felt kind of upset, but not like striking out in a bad way. So I had a feeling that if we made an offering, I knew instantly that this was a Native American spirit that it was out of balance because things that had gone on in the area. So what we did at the very end of the investigation is, you know, we dug a hole in the back part of the yard to where the, you know, tree line was fairly near. In the bottom of the hole, we put the, you know, the corn, the fruit, the sapling, and the tobacco. Planted the tree, made sure that it was, you know, upright, it was watered. Well, the homeowner, we said, like, you know, I think Alex said some words, and then, you know, we closed things down, and everything was good with the homeowner for a little while, and everything was taken care of until her neighbor did her a favor and mowed the grass and took his riding lawnmower and ran over the sapling that we had planted. And then literally it got everything really, you know, out of sorts. And then the spirits were just really ticked off after that. So with that said, that is the end of tonight's broadcast. I truly apologize for all of the technical glitches and my rotten dogs jumping around like a bunch of heathens. So I don't see any questions in the comment section tonight. So I am going to sign off for this week. I will post the notes in the group either tonight or tomorrow morning. The video will be up on our YouTube channel, BYOSpirit Paranormal, tomorrow morning sometime after I have a chance to edit it. And thank you so much for coming and supporting us tonight. I wish that Marta had been able to join us. So with that said, be well and walk in the light, everyone. Good night.